Hey everybody, welcome to the VO Dojo's Ask the Sensei free webinar. We do this at the first Wednesday of every month, so glad to have you all here. I'm Tish Hicks. I'm the Master Sensei of the VO Dojo in beautiful downtown Burbank, California. Most of you aren't old enough to know that joke.
That's a shame, isn't it?
And we have with us today and on these calls all the time is our techno sensei, Dan Lenard, the home studio master. Thank you for being here with us. And our guest sensei today is Laurel Thomas. She's having a little bit of tech problems, so hopefully she'll be joining us shortly to share some of her experience and insights in e-learning. She's been doing quite well in e-learning from Texas. So excellent. Nice. Okay. So let's see. Let's vamp just a little bit longer. I'm excited. I just got back from a tour, a dojo tour. I was in Atlanta and did a sponsorship for my friend Valerie Hubbard's company, Actors Fast Track. And we did a one-day workshop in Atlanta called Voiceover, the Actor's Secret Weapon. We had great people like Jeffrey Umberger and Marjorie Ochos-Coons join us, and Zach Hanks was with us. And then we did the same thing in New York as well. And Lisa Fishoff was with us, and Jason from Stewart Talent. It's been really exciting. But I'm very glad to be home and be back with y'all. Let's see. Dan, anything that you want to share with everybody as we begin? Waiting for questions to come in?
Well, I mean, we've been getting, if you watch Facebook at all, there's been, I went on this rant on Monday night on my show and about microphones and how everybody out there seems to be obsessing about what microphone to have, as if that's going to change the way you perform copy, which it will not. It's I think people need to concentrate on being great voice actors, and the technology is going to follow along afterwards. And it's not the technology that gets you the work. It's bad technology that gets you work, or that doesn't get you work. And you want to be able to have, the best that you can have. But what good is really great stuff if you don't know how to use it?
Excellent. Which is something that I wanted to ask when for today, since we don't get to hear your voice and we aren't interacting with our voice, which is just sort of a strange. It's a way to keep the webinar format flowing, although I don't know that it's ideal. But if you do have a tech question for Dan, it'd be very helpful to let us know what level of experience that you're working at so that we know what level to answer your question at. Because there's a mindset and approach when you're first starting that might be a little bit different than when you're more advanced. So we want to make sure that we're getting you the answers that you want and need. Great. Well, we have one question here.
Mm-hmm.
You, Dan, from Peggy Laurel, who is a dojo member in Santa Fe. Why don't you take that away, and please, everybody, make up some questions. This is what we can.
Even if you know the answer. Let's see here. Dan, that's me. Can you recommend any of the portable type voiceover boxes and equipment sold on places like Amazon.com for portability and temp setup at home until a formal setup for a home studio can be done? Interesting question. Somebody else asked me something very similar last night. If you are trying to get work, trying to set up a temporary system just simply for auditions is probably okay. There's, the question really becomes one of what's your budget for something like this? And if you're going to try and set up at home, why don't you find the way to set up at home as opposed to just sort of doing it sort of haphazard. If you're just starting out, you don't need anything sophisticated. If you're working, you don't need anything really sophisticated. Again, this is the same question that keeps getting asked over and over and over again. What's the best equipment that's going to get me work? Well, that's going to make me sound great. Again, I will throw out the three main things that are important when you're recording at home, which actually does answer the question, which is the number one factor is the acoustics of the area in which you record. You can have a really nice, portable rig, but if you're in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles, is not going to help you. Acoustics, keeping noise out and keeping room reflection to a minimum is number one. Number two is mic technique. So if you have a fairly good mic and you use it properly in the proper acoustical environment, that's great. Number three is proper modulation, which happens to go with mic technique. So everybody's like looking for this silver bullet secret sauce type of equipment that's going to make them sound great. The only thing that's going to make you sound great is your brain looking at the copy and making sure you understand what it says, using proper mic technique, proper acoustics, and proper level setting. So any mic over $150, even a USB mic over $200, and most of them aren't over $200, so don't buy those. There are some excellent USB mics. The Epigee One is an excellent all-in-one solution to that, and it's good enough to be your regular setup, despite what some people might tell you.
That's this little one, Dan?
That little guy, the Epigee mic, especially their newer model, which is excellent. It has a headphone jack on it. It has all sorts of stuff that makes it, that's the older one. The newer one is actually even better. and they're a company in Santa Monica, so they're very good about, getting stuff to you quickly. It's an easy thing to set up. I've used those in a number of closet setups with people, and they're getting work.
Mm-hmm.
And again, with that, mic technique is really critical. So,
and to the question of, is there a portable type of voiceover box that you would recommend if that was a solution that
well, the Epigee mic is an excellent solution.
And it doesn't matter. I think Peggy might be talking about like a Hogan, like a Harlan Hogan portable box thing.
Oh yeah, you mean like an interface? She's talking about a portabooth.
Yeah, a portabooth. Yes.
Yeah, a portabooth can be used as a permanent solution. That's the thing but you got to use it right. Technique with that is really, really critical. Mm-hmm. And the portabooth is great. You can try and build your own. You can get a 3-panel science project thing over at the drugstore or over at Staples or Target or something like that, and you can put acoustical foam on those for a temporary solution. But the best temporary solution is to find a closet with lots of clothes in it. That will save you a lot of money.
Even better.
Yes. Our good friend Laurel has arrived.
Yes. Well, let's finish up this, and then we'll introduce you. I'm so glad you're here. So in terms of, so what you're saying is you don't need to have a specific thing that's made for that.
Right.
And then can you go into detail about if you do use one of those things, what would be the technique to make it effective? I think you were talking about
the Portabooth. There's the Portabooth Pro and the Portabooth Plus, which they're not cheap, but they do work if you use them right. The technique is simply don't talk into the middle of it. If you talk into the middle of it, it sounds like you're talking in a cave. That's not how you use it. The same rules that you would use with any studio condenser mic apply. The real trick is to sort of talk right underneath the top lip of it. We discovered that just eliminates the cave sound to it and allows you to have proper mic technique with it. And so, the top lip of the so the microphone would be down here, and you talk straight into the top. That way, you're not, getting plosives on the mic. You're eliminating the cave sound that those things can create. Either one of Harlan Hogan's portabooths or one that you make by yourself, which we don't recommend. and having something behind you, like a blanket hanging behind you, because acoustics go both ways. And what that was designed for, what all of these porta booths were designed for, was on the road stuff for broadcasters and people doing promo work using a Sennheiser 416, because it's effective for that. For a regular studio mic, you got to use that technique, and that can yield really good results. But I wouldn't recommend it as a permanent solution. It might work. Best to find an isolated closet with lots of clothes in it, or something that you can put moving blankets or acoustical tile on the side to treat it. It's not a simple one-step process. Every room is different. Every voice is different. Therefore, every situation has to be done in custom fashion for you. So that's why we recommend that, and you need to have some professional help to really get it right. You can go on Facebook and ask that question and get 10,000 different answers, or you can just talk to somebody like me who can immediately.
Right. Well, hopefully that answers your question, Peggy. Laurel, hi. How are you?
Hello. I'm great.
Yeah.
Thanks for waiting for me.
Oh,
isn't technology wonderful?
Yeah, well, welcome. So glad you're here. I gave a little introduction about that you're joining us in to share insights and answer questions about your e-learning superpowers. But if you wanna introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you've been up to, and yeah, that'd be great.
Sure, thanks. As you said, Laurel Thomas, I'm in the Dallas area, and been full-time officially for a little bit now. But I've been doing this as a business for close to 7 years. The reason why I get asked about e-learning a lot is because not only do I do a lot of e-learning narration, as many people do, but I have a little bit different background than most people. I am actually have been in the corporate training development world for close to 20 years, actually over 20 years. So I come at it from the, hey, I create the courses as well as narrate them. And my past, how I got here, is kind of in two different tracks. It's that corporate world from the business and training development. And so I know that from an insider's perspective, but I've also been in performing arts almost all of my life, starting from being a dancer at age 2 through baton, drill team, color guard, dance, a lot of other things, drama, acting, all that kind of stuff. So I was just thinking about this earlier. It's interesting how those two worlds really combine in e-learning narration. And so I'm able to use both of those skills in order to be really good at the e-learning narration world. And if people aren't familiar with that as much, it's basically any online training or electronic version of training. There's a lot more mobile training these days. Even training is done through video. And there's a lot more of that type of training because it's just another method than an in-person instructor-led training course. But there's a lot of it out there, and it's constantly growing. And I can certainly answer people's questions about, where do you find the work? How do you get into this business? What kind of, training do you need to have? What demos are like for that area? Because it is very different than the commercial world and other genres like that.
In terms of both how you approach the work, how you deliver the work, and how you get the work, right?
Right, yes. It's a very different approach because it's not broadcast and it's not seen as much in the creative space. It's the business world. So, for example, you're not looking for people with the job titles of producer or creative director. You're looking for designers and managers. And it's a little bit different. If you haven't had a business background, you kind of have to adjust your approach and learn a lot more about that business in order to reach those audiences and talk to people using their language.
Ah, right. I'm so glad you're here. Yay. Good. Well, excellent. So that should spark a lot of, that opens wide any questions that you have about this. We have it right here, the source from both sides of the glass. So let's see. Dan, it looks like you answered Anne's question about moving blankets, lining space being thumbs up.
Yep.
And Kurt has a question.
Yeah, this I was sort of answering this one text, but I can cover it really quick. Again, a misunderstanding here. He says, I have a solid commercial agent. That's great. My acoustics are good. Well, I have to hear to make sure. With plenty of foam inside a converted armoire. I use a CAD GXL 2600 USB mic with twisted wave on my Mac. Okay, should I be using a preamp for more clarity? With the CAD GXL 2600 USB mic, absolutely not, because it's a USB mic. It has its own preamp in it. There's no way you could hook one to the other. I think it helps to understand the difference between a USB mic and a mic that has an XLR output on it. That one requires a digital interface preamp, but not a great preamp. The GXL 2600 USB is a standalone unit, so you don't need a preamp for that. But I certainly would like to hear what your audio sounds like. So if you can submit some audio to me, I can determine if it sounds right. Again, remember this one point. Everybody's trying to make themselves sound great. And everybody, is going to try everything they can to try and sound great to your ears. The problem is that you don't hire you. So it would behoove anybody who's setting up a home studio to let somebody who actually knows what it's supposed to sound like listen to it. So you feel a little bit more assured that your audio is on par. And that answers that.
Excellent. All roads lead to Dan, but we get some information on the way. it's
Well, I was going to say, and things are changing too, because it used to be, now it depends on, I think, Dan, the quality of the USB mic. USB used to be just like, no, don't use USB for this level of recording. There's so many that as the technology improves and changes, some USBs get better. But there is still a difference between that direct connection versus using a preamp from a higher quality to begin with condenser microphone.
Right. And again, if you have one, technique sort of trumps everything else, unless you have a really lousy mic, which is why I was saying anything, $200, a good super quality USB mic can be just fine if you use it right.
Exactly.
Excellent. Good. Is that helpful, Kurt? Excellent. All right. So many people, so few questions. Very interesting.
We have to entertain them all here? Come on now.
There's several questions. They're coming through on chat and the questions.
Okay.
And
oh, let me see it. Maybe I haven't seen the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. So yeah, great. Excellent. So here's, I've got tons of questions. I can fill up the whole hour. Okay. Laurel, Jim Sharkey says, do corporate training folks rely on narration agents? Meaning, like, does this work come through your agents, Jim? Is that what you mean?
That's what it sounds like. Typically, most don't. I'm not saying that you don't. There aren't any agents out there who might do some corporate narration, get gigs probably through companies they already have relationship with, or ones that are really high, like, McDonald's and Ford and stuff. But honestly, I've done some stuff for Ford that wasn't through an agent. I would say the majority is not. People who are voice seekers who are looking for narrators of this type typically do one of two things. Well, let me start with, there's two different avenues for who you're getting the work from. You're either getting it directly from the company itself who's doing its training, or through training producers. So just like anything, a company can create its own commercials, but they typically farm that out to video production companies or commercial production companies. That exists in the corporate training world as well. There are companies out there that just do training development for a lot of other clients. And those can be anywhere from mom and pop to, like I said, the McDonald's of the world. So those production companies typically have their own rosters. And in addition to that, those, as well as direct companies, often use honestly, they use a lot of the play-to-play sites, Voice123, Vidalgo, and those kinds of things. I've gotten several regular ongoing clients through those. Once they found me there, then they contact me directly after that. But most the production companies will typically have their own rosters. And that's where I usually recommend people to start with first. And you're looking for those that do custom training development. Here's what you Google: custom training development or custom e-learning. Because those are the ones that are creating new stuff all the time. There are production companies out there that just do off the shelf. They're just selling, or they're just a platform, what's called a learning management system, just to play. They're not really creating anything. So you're looking for content developers that are doing custom things, because that means they're doing new things all the time. You can get really good relationships directly with a company. You can kind of become the voice of that company. A lot of companies, it's kind of like a funnel. You start with all these companies that do training, and then how many of those do e-learning, and then how many of those need narration in their e-learning, because not every e-learning course actually includes narration either. And then you're whittling it down to how often do they do that. A reason why companies farm out that work to other production companies is because either they have too much and they can't get it all done, or they don't do it enough to justify doing it in-house. So that's why getting with those, you can get really good deals working directly with a company, but most of that work is going to come through the custom development production companies that are out there. And there's new ones all the time.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
And I would say there's questions about union. I'm sure there are people out there who do e-learning through union. And there are ways to, pay masters and things like that to convert that work. I would say the majority of it is non-union because it's from the business world, not from the commercial production broadcast side. There are some categories and rates in the union structure. It's I don't know if it's still called industrial. It kind of falls under that business industrial type category. So they do have that. I've found actually that a lot of those rates are lower than what I actually get and what a lot of people get working directly with those companies. So I'm sure there's a way to make it union for you directly, but the majority of it is going to start out as non-union.
And is it non-union or non-jurisdictional? Two distinctions, right?
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. So that's another.
That's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. Because I know promo for cable is non-jurisdictional. It's not union, but it's not non-union. So I would guess, just putting a star by that if I'm wrong, but I would guess it actually qualifies as non-union.
Okay, cool.
But I'd have to check for sure on that. So
that's a good question to bring to the next meeting. Excellent. I was looking at the answered questions. That's why I was like, hey guys, where are your questions?
Oh yeah, there's a bunch now. No.
Fantastic. Good. Okay. So Andrew asks, as a newcomer who doesn't really do character VO, how important are acting skills to e-learning?
I would say that, acting skills for any voiceover we do is applicable. For e-learning narration, especially nowadays, there are so many more approaches that you're taking. And it's not just the talking head or the instructional person who's sharing all this knowledge with you. Nowadays, there's a lot more scenario-based training where, you may be like the narrator to say, now you're going to watch a scenario with Bob and Mike, and they're going to play out this management thing that you just learned, in front of you. Then there's a little video or even an animation that's, Bob and Mike's the manager and he's talking to his employee. So Mike, I heard that you had some trouble with, your T-47s or whatever that board is from The Office. And, so there's a lot more like dialogue related type things. And the more that you can show that you can do those, include little bits and pieces on that. Sometimes there's narrators who are talking to each other, but they're sharing the information with you. So it's like they're learning, but you're learning along with them. I've done a few of those where, Dave's the main narrator and I come in and ask, the questions, So when I hear the fire alarm, where do I go? How do I know where the exit is? and then he'll say, so there's a lot more of that. So any acting that you have is going to help because you come at it from different approaches. Oftentimes they're making the narrator like an actual animated character, like, hi, I'm your agent and I'm here, I'm a fellow employee. I'm here to guide you along. So it's more, there's a saying that I use quite often. It's no longer the sage on the stage, it's the guide on the side. So the more you can be more relatable and talking to somebody, helping them along, and not just a straight, here is what you are going to learn in this course. There is quite a bit of that, just the standard training narrator. But acting skills definitely help because as it becomes more scenario-based and there's more games, learning game style, you can definitely add that and show that you can do more. I mean, I've had some clients who are like, hey, we just have this one little dialogue piece. Can you change your voice, to do that so it doesn't sound like you? I'm yes, I can change my voice.
Yeah, I could add that, I've done a lot of work like that. I actually did one this week where I was some doctor talking in some board meeting of some sort and trying to explain medical stuff. But again, it's acting because I'm not Dr. Goldman. But you have to put yourself in that situation. I spent a lot when I was in the life insurance business back in 1990. They would throw us in a boardroom and show us these awful videos about how to promote, how to motivate yourself and how to sell and all those. And I'm like, my God, these are so boring. Please change the way you do these. And a lot of these companies are starting to do that. So remembering that, thinking, I can just imagine these guys sitting in their boardroom going, oh God, make it interesting and make it fun and make it come alive and make it relatable. And, and eventually, you'll get called to do that. I mean, they just emailed me out of the blue and said, can you be this guy? I'm like, yeah, sure. I've never heard of these people before. Sure. But, as long as the check clears, who cares?
Right.
And I think what Laurel and Dan are also saying, that everything we do in voiceover is how are we conveying something that makes people engaged and activated and connected with us. So the more that we can do that, and whether you call that acting or voice acting, but it seems I love this guide on the side image, right? Mm-hmm. Whenever we talk about any narration here at the dojo, it's you are a guide. You are actively guiding someone through a situation, and so if you can always put yourself in that situation, then you know how to find the pacing and make sure that someone's with you. So here's the whole thing. You with me? Excellent. Moving on. But make sure that there's always that connection. And I think that's where, if you call that acting, then that's how the whole conversational that you hear in commercial world, that is bleeding into the corporate narration world. And that's the best way of thinking of it, is that I'm not here as a talking head to just, open up your head and like pour all my knowledge in there. But I'm guiding you along as a helper and a fellow employee. That helps it get to that sort of conversational style that the corporate world doesn't really know how to explain that, just as much as, a lot of commercial people don't know how to explain to be, conversational, but that is feeding into that world as well. And that's a good way to approach it. Yeah. I think that making the difference between being talked at and shared with. Right. Talking with still, but if you share something,
talk to versus talk with, that kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Good. All right, now there's tons of questions. Let's see.
Yeah.
What's next? We kind of touched on the, let's see, got that. Here's a good question. What approach do you use before recording an e-learning script? Which is a great question because when you're working on an e-learning project, you're not just saying the words, you're creating the delivered product, right? Or about that.
And it's the entire package. So in a similar way to audiobooks narration, you need to have kind of like read through the script. You don't have to at least get an idea of what terms are used, how the flow is, and especially how it's broken up as well, because scripts for e-learning usually come, a course is typically, it can be divided into screens, or you may have modules, like one module, and there's like multiple modules for a project. You may get, 4 different modules or courses. So there's a lot of terminology to get around, but it's also how the script is broken down, because it's typically broken into pieces by screens, but it still has a flow to it.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely read through it first. Just to get an idea of the feel, and you'll see company jargon, you'll see terms that are repeated over and over and over again. So think about, like, if that's the new thing, do you really have to emphasize that thing over and over again, or is it really just the first time? Because you're going to talk about it multiple times. So that helps you get an idea of, like, the key with e-learning, anything that's training you to do something. The goal is for you to do something differently when you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Because either you don't know something or something has changed. It basically falls into one of those categories.
Mm-hmm.
It's something new. So that's what you're looking for. What's new and what's changed. And you'll see that in the script, because it'll talk about, now you can do this. Now you can see all your employee performance appraisals in one place. And when you click here, it does that. So you're getting an idea of, like, oh, this is the part that's different. That's where I need to, make those points. In addition to, you really need to know who the audience is and also what the purpose is. And that you can definitely get from your client. And don't be afraid to ask those questions, for sure, because you need to be a partner in the process, just as much as the developers and the graphic people and the legal who has to look at everything. You're as much as a partner in that process as they are. And especially because the narration is typically at the very end. So if anything hasn't been caught up till now, you can see that in the script. For example, if you're reading through it and they refer to their employees as team members, every team member this, team members that, blah, 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 and then you see employees somewhere. Point that out. Say, hey, is this supposed to be team members? Because the rest of it was. Mm-hmm. People in the business world are so thankful when you are smart. When you show that you're a professional and you're not just reading the words on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Be a partner in the process and show that, like, you actually read it and you can follow along. Because just like anything, people who write scripts typically don't say them out loud. So the more that you catch those kinds of things, or even grammatical error, everybody makes mistakes, but we're talking about things that are longer. You're going to have a better chance of finding a grammatical error in something that's 4 pages long than a 30-second commercial.
Yeah.
So definitely read through, know who your audience is, because if you're talking to doctors at a certain level, and what's different in that script are basic medical terms, things that you really need to emphasize and slow down and point out. No. What are the things that they are looking for that is different? What is the purpose of this? Oh, it's a new system. It's a new procedure. It's a new product that this person's going to have to sell. So the more you know about who your audience is and what the purpose is, you can see in the script what it is that's different, and what it is that's new, and that's where you put your emphasis in. Everything else is just basically needs to just flow through. Mm-hmm. Because your goal at the end is for them to be able to get through this course, especially if it's compliance stuff, which is always required and everybody hates it because it's like ethics and sexual harassment and all that kind of stuff. If you get to the end of it and go like, yeah, I can do that, whatever it is I'm supposed to do differently, then you have solved the problem. Mm-hmm. You've made you've accomplished the goal. Right. And especially if somebody gets to the end of it and they go, oh, that wasn't too bad. Compliance training usually sucks. And that really wasn't that bad. Right. And you don't want to be, you're rarely noticed for your voice for a good reason. If somebody says, oh, wow, the narrator on that, it's usually because they can tell. It should feel seamless to the course. It should feel a part of it, and it should be seamless, and it should feel like it's a balance of the text and the graphics and any video animations and the narration. It should be all part of the piece of the puzzle of the product. So you have to be just as much of a piece of the puzzle in the production of it.
Right. And it's not about you, it's about the impact that you're having.
Exactly. If you can make it seem as easy as possible, all the better for your audience.
Yeah. Dan, I wanted to ask you, because in addition to your coming from the business in the insurance world, you also are an educator. So you have the understanding too of what is it to build a curriculum, and how do you know, there's structure to building a curriculum that if you don't have that background, it's probably good to also put yourself in the mindset of how are people what is the information and how are people receiving it, and what are
Yeah. I mean, there's there's a lot of questions here on technique and narration style and stuff like that. As Laura was saying, there's a lot of different things going on here. There is just the basic narration of a video. There's the narration of, or you are a character in an animation. Or a lot of times I get a lot of stuff where I get the idea that I am teaching a class here. Seeing as I know how to teach a class, and thank God I don't have to use chalk, you just sort of, put yourself like you're in front of a classroom, and you read through the copy, you see what it is the point is trying to get across, and teach it. Get their attention. Tell them what you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them.
Right.
And a good technical writer or a good e-learning writer is going to do that. It also helps if you have really good cultural literacy. If you understand the business in which you are working in here, you can just read the script and act like you're there, or you can do a little bit of research. What does this company do? What is the product they sell? How is it that they sell it? Those sorts of things. You have to do a little bit of homework. If you are very knowledgeable about things, I mean, I've done things like I've learned more about lock systems than anybody in this country. It's a 25 kilohertz proximity card. Yeah, I love showing off that one. You can learn how to install things. You can, if you're handy, if you can if you're good at spatial explanations, and you can act that out with your voice, that's a big help. And so cultural literacy is pretty important. But again, do your homework, understand what the product or service that the client is providing, and who's the audience. Is it their sales force? Is it people learning how to use their product?
Right.
It's all of those.
Technical people? Is it customer service? Is it sales? Is it executive management level? Yeah, and from that too, that kind of research, you can get an idea of how formal is the company, and does that match what the script is? Does the script use a lot of contractions and little wink? Hey, did you think that was too much or something? Does it talk that way, or is it very formal? And is that different than what the company culture is from what you can see in just looking at their company website?
Yeah. I think it's important to understand that this is probably the majority of work that most of us do. Commercial work, it's hard to get.
I know a lot of people who make the majority of their money just through corporate narration and e-learning.
Yeah, and so it's important to know the different genres of this stuff, because there's so many different genres of corporate narration, medical stuff where you have to be really dull, but be able to pronounce ankylosing spondylitis without thinking about it.
And I think this mindset also is a great way to find your in about who do you want to address, who could you serve well as like going after clients or building your client list. If you know everything about cars and can talk about I don't know everything about cars, so I'm not even going to be like, hey, my carburetor, but I can tell you about horses, right? So that's another way you can find your way in. And then it was really interesting. We had a fantastic panel at the Actor's Secret Weapon workshop in New York, and those casting director who just works in old school, how it's always been in New York, and then another gal who's totally coming up in the new paradigm. So I think for all of us, those of us who have been doing this for 100 years, you don't need to do anything, but where are you leaving money on the table, right? So that's the way to look at it. So if this is something that's interesting you, like if you've been doing this for a long time, how can you explore this as something else, and as something that you can also be doing in terms of your diversifying your revenue streams. And if you're coming up, this narration work is stuff that you can take the reins on, and you can put your business in action by building relationships with your customers and your clients, and you can make a really solid foundation. And that, that's what you've done, Laurel, right? You've got this going, and now you're like, and I want to do that, and I want to work in this market.
And it's a lot of repeat work. Like I said, if you get on with, a good production company, and they'll use you for several different clients of theirs, or you work directly with a company and they're like, hey, we've got this huge, 12 module thing that's going to last, 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
It is consistent work. And when you establish a good working relationship with somebody, they will typically come back to you.
Yeah. Let's get some more questions, because they're really good questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of good questions coming across. I don't feel like we're not going to get to all of them.
Yeah, well, let's see what we can do. And I would, I would also love to hear a little bit about pricing and how you do rates and what you can expect.
Mm-hmm.
If you're new to this, you're like, I don't know. But then you start doing a couple jobs, like, really? That much for that?
Yeah.
Totally. I can redo it and you'll pay me again? Okay, sure. Yeah, so that would be a question that I have. But let's take Nan's question. When you do narration for e-learning, do you record from your home studio? If so, please share the technical requirements you encounter and what your recording process is from start to finish. That's huge, because a lot of this is really about labeling and organized, right? That's part of the delivery and being able to not go crazy while it's not just saying the words, it's being able to. Right.
I would say there's one big thing for recording and one big thing for editing. Recording is, first it has to start out just like anything else, the highest quality possible, your best recording space, no outside noise, things like that. The thing with e-learning narration is that what happens when it goes from when you send it to your client, either as a WAV or, heaven forbid, an MP3, it goes into a course creation software, and that typically smashes it down to MP3 level or sometimes lower. And then it goes into a learning management system platform, and sometimes that smashes it down even more. And then it goes through, a low bandwidth dial-up to some satellite office in Utah, where some salesperson's listening to it on his, Windows 98 computer on speakers or earbuds or something like that, so it ends up sounding like it can end up sounding like a really low grade, like phone system voicemail or something like that. So the highest quality that you can start with, the better. Mm-hmm. Because it just gets smashed down in quality so much. It gets, what's the word? It's not downgraded, but anyway, I think you get what I mean. And no like compression, don't do anything fancy with it. Make it clean and loud. Clean, high quality, and loud to begin with. The highest quality that you can. And here's where, with editing, typically, like I said, you're going to break it up into pieces. That's one additional thing that you typically don't do, even for audiobooks. You probably have bigger sections of audiobooks, but when you're doing commercials, it's a few takes of 30 seconds and that kind of thing, or a video that's a minute. Here we're talking about something that could be 45 minutes long, and you're going to break it up into 20 pieces. So the whole file splitting, that's what that's called, file splitting and naming. You'll typically get a script that has all the pieces broken out, and it'll have like a screen name or number or slide, and then the script. So the key is splitting that up, and you can negotiate with your client whether you charge extra for that or whether it's included in the rate. There's different things to go by. And then the key is to make sure you're naming them exactly, because there's a reason for it. It seems really tedious and crazy on our end when you have something that's a file name that's M1L2C4S-27.
Copy paste.
It doesn't mean anything to you, but it means something to the designer and the developer. Mm-hmm. And they're not always in sequence. It may say slide 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 20. So it's a thing that you have to be careful for, but the more you can do without mistake makes you more professional and easier to work with, and one of the reasons they will keep coming back to you.
Yeah.
If you make the process as easy as possible on their end, they will keep coming back to you for that work.
Right.
not just in how you do it, but in the way that you do it.
Yeah.
And how you narrate, but also how you provide audio and how quickly you do it and how easily you make it for them.
Right. And there's some great software that can, assist you with this.
Yes.
Like Twisted Wave,
Yes.
Adobe Audition, that allows you to very rapidly divide up files. So it's not like record file, save, record
yes.
file, save. It's
There's a
recording.
software. Yeah.
Right.
If you work on a PC, it's called Word to Wave. You can put, as long as the document is formatted a certain way, it will automatically take those file names and name your files that way, your audio files that way. Twisted Wave, you use markers, and then there's a feature called Split by Markers, and it saves them all out as separate files. So you just record one whole file, do your markers, name them how they need to be, and just do Split by Markers, and it saves them all as separate files. So yeah, the technology is getting better to accommodate that kind of need. But that's one of the differences in how e-learning is different than a lot of other genres, is that piece of it.
Yeah.
But as far as recording, you're still recording the way you would record anything. But typically people just record all the way through and then edit after.
So. And then the point becomes, how fast can you do it? And how efficient can you be?
How
the
efficient
more time
you are.
the higher the cost is to you. So
exactly.
if you do it very, very quickly, using some of these techniques, I mean, you can cut down a ratio of 3:1 to 1:1. Takes an hour to record and an hour to edit and process and get it back to the client. That makes you golden to them.
Exactly. And easier on you, especially like audiobooks. If you're doing a price that's per finished minute, it's the less time it takes on you, the more that money is valuable, the higher value it has for your time. Yeah.
And while I'm looking for the next question, what would be a rate? Like where, I mean, obviously you're super skilled at this, but where should people be setting their sights at, like a per finished minute?
That's typically how I like to do rates. There are also per word rates, but per finished minute is pretty good, because that's easy to measure. You can take your word count and then estimate, that's an easy way to explain it to your client if they're not used to how you do that. There are some places that try to do, hour rates for your time, and it all depends on if they're doing editing or if you're doing editing, because some of these custom production companies, they do editing on their end, and so of course the rates are going to be lower, which is fine because you're not having to do all that work.
Right.
But a good range, and I think this is what the GVAA rate guide has. It's pretty good. That, or Sean Caldwell has done a lot of research, which I think fed into the GVAA, but like $15 to $30 per finished minute is a good range. There's some that I've gone down to as low as 10 if it was like a ton of stuff and I didn't have to do if I didn't have to do any editing, it was just raw audio and I just send it and they do it all on their end. But that's a pretty standard range.
Cool.
For pay rate.
Taking into account what is the scope? I would imagine the complexity of the script too.
There are people who charge more for medical narration just because of the terminology.
Right. So that requires that you look everything up and make sure.
I mean, and that depends on, are they providing pronunciations? Do you have to go look it up yourself? That kind of thing. I would say, other than medical, I don't charge differently for like the content type.
Okay.
Only because medical is like, it's a subset. It's its own subset of e-learning. There are people who just do medical e-learning narration and they make a good living at it. There's a lot out there for that. But yeah, so either per word, which per word, we could talk about how you do per word, but you have to be careful about that because they'll give you a script and they'll say, oh, it's so many words because they just did word count, on their Word document. But you have to look at numbers. You have to look at dollars. You have to look at company names and acronyms, especially because if you have something, $478,292.48. In word, that's one word.
Right.
So what I mean, so you have to do a little bit of work. That's why I like just doing finished minute because it's easier. I like to make it as easy as possible on my clients. So when I charge at the higher rates, but I say, but it includes all of the file splitting. A lot of people do like $1 per file for splitting and naming, in addition to your regular rate. I include my studio, like I don't charge extra for studio fees. And I include a certain amount of retakes, one round of edits included. Because in the corporate world, like you have to expect there's always going to be changes. This is not a, hey, we're doing a commercial and it has to be on air in an hour, and you just go. This is like, it's business and it's corporate and legal has to go through it. And there's almost always going to be changes. So anticipate that.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to include just at least one round of edits as long as it's not, a complete redo of everything.
Yeah.
So I like to make it easy and just give like one rate and here's all the stuff that's included. If you want a lower rate, then we'll take out things like me editing and me doing file split. If you want to pay lower, then I won't do as much for it.
That's great. It's super clear. Like
there's the clients who want it differently, and so you adjust your rates accordingly. But I try to make it as easy as possible for them to pay me. So one rate is all you need.
Global Village Acting Academy is a great place to get rates for everything, but that's a great place to start. And then
yes, and those are good industry averages.
Yeah. And Sean Caldwell, is it SHWN or S?
No, it's SEAN.
Yeah. Okay. So that's another.
He did a lot of research on rates, and he's done a lot of presentations at various conferences and things like that. So I think those pretty much fit within what the GVAA has these days. So.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Cool. Oh my gosh, there's so many.
I know.
Excellent.
There's been a few questions about demos.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's start with Jordan's there's okay, so lots of questions. Jordan asks, what's the best way to reach out to e-learning companies if I have a commercial?
Mm-hmm.
Okay to do an audio sample. And then Paula also is, can a self-produced demo be equally good? These are good questions.
Yeah, I think there was another one about, is it the same as a narration demo or something like that? E-learning definitely does have its own demo need. I would say if you're really out there marketing yourself, you really need to have your own e-learning demo. One of the differences with, of course, e-learning has to be different than everybody else. The demo is different as well. You can go to a lot of the places that do other types of demos and get a fully produced, music and sound effects and everything demo, but that's not what your clients want. I can tell you in the over 20 years I've been doing training development, I've never put music in a course in addition to the text and the graphics and the audio. So you'll get asked a lot if you have like an overproduced sort of demo that has music and all this stuff behind it. You may typically then get asked, hey, can you send me just a dry demo?
Mm-hmm.
Which means nothing. They just want to hear your voice. That's it. Because that's what's going to be in the course, because they're already seeing all of this other stuff. They're seeing video and they're seeing graphics and text and everything else, and listening to your voice at the same time. So your clients only want to hear just your voice. Now on my particular demo, I have one that has just a little bit of music behind it just to kind of break it up a little bit. And then for kids stuff, if you're doing a lot of kids education or K through 12, some of that stuff has music behind it because it's more like game based.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a little kids one, so I have some music on that. The rest of it is totally dry.
Yeah. No,
because that's what your clients will ask for. They'll say, yeah, that's a really nice demo, but can I get it without all the music and all the stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So why spend all that money if, and you may get like, an executive or a top management who says, hey, yeah, this demo sounds great. I'll send it to the training department, but the training department's going to ask you for a dry one anyway.
Oh.
So in that respect, it is a little bit more conducive to kind of the self-produced approach. My demo has just work that I've done. So as soon as you've done some work, use that.
Right.
Use those pieces. As far as what to put on a demo, a lot of it depends on, like, are there areas that you really want to focus on? Like, do you really love the tech stuff? Do you really love technical? And so you do that. If you're just open to, sort of a generalist and you want to do a variety, even just a little bit of medical stuff, then put a little bit of everything and include kind of the things we've been talking about where you have sort of the straight narrator, you've got some dialogue, where it's more of a conversation, or you're doing a scenario, where you're like, this is my, hey, Jude, noticed that, you made a mistake on that, that call. We really need to talk about your performance, those scenario things, and then do a customer service one that's more what they call soft skills, where it's not anything technical, but it's, relationship building and team building and management style and that kind of thing, leadership skills.
Mm-hmm.
And then do a technical that's a system. Click here to do that, then enter this text and press that tab. So have a little bit of variety, some non-technical, some technical, maybe a little bit of medical. If you want to do something kids, do some scenarios, and you're good. I mean, it shouldn't be anything longer than a minute to a minute and a half, just like most demos today. Right. But it doesn't have to be overproduced with a bunch of music and sound effects and everything, because that's not how courses actually are delivered.
Yeah, you're never going to do any of that type of work. So don't obsess about how do I do all that type of work. It takes years to learn how to mix properly and do all that type of stuff.
And these clients, they don't want that anyway. They're not going to use it in their courses, so why they don't want to hear it in a demo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we're coming to the end, but this is, I think this answers my question of, Laurel, I was going to ask if you wanted to do some sort of, you should do e-learning sort of collaboration with the Dojo. It seems like there's a lot.
Love to. I know. I want to answer more of these questions.
Let's see if we can.
And yes, people should get training in e-learning narration, because it is its own kind of beast. If you've only come from, a commercial standpoint, first of all, there's the whole stamina thing. It's not to the length of audiobooks. You don't have to stand up for an hour, but it is long form.
Right.
Or it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not used to doing, 5, 15, 20 minutes at a time, that might be a bit of a change. And it has its own style, because it is narration, but it's not a documentary. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily a video, but it's, you know what I mean? It's like, it has its own feel. And like I said, it is just as much concerned now with not sounding boring and robotic, and wants to sound as friendly and casual and easy. That's how I always look at it. It's make it sound as easy as possible. I sometimes put the word just, like the whole just do it thing from Nike. It was like, they tried to make it like, duh, all you have to do is just do it. So I sometimes do that when I'm getting into something and I'm not feeling it, like, just click the button, just suture that guy up. It's easy. As much as you can approach it that way, it will come across that way to your audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely need training in it, because it is its own beast.
This is great. Gosh, I'm torn.
But it's a cute beast, and it's nice, and it pays well.
Well, before we jump off, if you are interested in doing a more in-depth workshop, let us know in the chat and contact us. I think just to honor our 11 o'clockness, do want to wrap up. But if people have other questions, are you open to them reaching out to you, Laurel?
Absolutely.
And what's the best way for them to reach you?
Email's fine. It's voiceover at laurelthomas.com.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the only one who does this. And I'm not the only one who is kind of an expert or sort of teaches about it or talks about it. I just come from a different perspective, because I have sort of that insider knowledge on how the business works. Mm-hmm. So if you're like completely new to that, I can definitely help educate you. And there are many resources out there too, if you want to find out more about the business. Just a quick one is Association for Talent Development, ATD, is their big association, training association it's an international organization.
That's cool.
They'll have local chapters in major cities. So wherever you are, look for that, or just look for, just resources on what is instructional design, what are the trends in e-learning, development today. You know, the more you find out about it, especially if you're totally new, because I have to keep forgetting that not everybody knows what I know. I forgot what it's like to not know what I know. Is that because it's so different if you're not from the business world, it really does take some education into this if you really want to get into it. And I'm telling you, it is fascinating and it is interesting. And I know people who have just dove right in and they love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then also if you come from a business background, it's a perfect segue.
It's easier. Yeah. Because you understand like corporate structure.
Mm-hmm.
And job titles and things like that. You know, it's the training manager or the instructional design developer rather than the creative producer.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you have a business background, it helps. And I know people who have taken kind of like Dan, like your experience that you had, and then they promote themselves as specializing in that area.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people who have medical backgrounds and they do that, or if you just like one particular area. You know, I know a guy who really likes golf. And so he's doing everything he can in golf, including e-learning, you know, so he targets himself to that. E-learning can be just a generalized area, but if you wanted to really specialize in certain niches, the business is out there for it.
Yeah. I was like, whoosh, this is so exciting. There's so much to know. So voiceover at laurelthomas.com. We're clearly going to be talking about doing something else because there's a lot of people who are interested.
I know, and I wish I could answer all these questions. They're really good.
Well, well, let's get that together, and then
let's do another thing. Let's do another thing on e-learning. There's plenty of interest out there.
And Dan, in terms of connecting with you technically, or you also have lots of e-learning experience, how do people reach you?
Well, they can, if they need help with their home studio and would like to drop off a sample of their audio so I can give it a listen to see where they're at, they can go to homevoiceoverstudio.com. Don't ask me how I was able to get a great website name like that, but if you're an early adopter, you get that kind of stuff. Or you can email me at dan@danlenard.com, which is Lenard. And also on Monday nights, make sure you watch Voiceover Body Shop.
Yeah.
VOBS.TV, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern, and 9:30 in Newfoundland.
Excellent. And in terms of what's going on at the dojo, we have You Should Do Voiceover Virtual Intensive that's starting on Saturday, and also looking to get more people in the Monday night. So we're kind of aiming towards working actors that have those nights off. But we have some slots open, and would love to have you join that. Also, I'm going to be teaching a week-long workshop in Maine at the Maine Media Workshop, June 17th through 22nd. So it's going to be full force, full week. It's going to be like a graduate course in 1 week. And Laurel and Dan, I'm going to talk with you about being experts on that as well. I can't take you to the Maine with me, but we'll be able to work virtually. So that's that. And then anytime, guys, always, you can go to the website, www.thevodojo.com, and sign up for VoiceOver Once Over. If you have questions about anything that we're talking about here or anything about the dojo, or anything, sign up and we can talk for 15 minutes or whatever you need. And then we will make something up because y'all have some great questions and there is a lot to be learned. So thank you guys for taking the time. Laurel, it's so good to have you. And Dan, as always, fantastic to have you here. We do this the first Wednesday of every month. Ask the Sensei. Different awesome people join us for different insights. Tell your friends. We'll see you next month and look forward to talking with you more if you have other questions. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me on, Tish. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Tish. Talk to you soon.